Well, today I brought on Glenn Evans, and me and him have had so many conversations around burnout, but more specifically around male burnout, men's mental health. Obviously, I am not a male. I cannot talk or speak on men's mental health, but me and Glenn have had so many conversations about burnout, the root causes of that. Why aren't we talking about that? And what's amazing, why I invited Glenn on here is he's from the trades. You know I'm from manufacturing, 2 decades HR leader, and male dominant field. Why aren't we talking about this? And after talking to Glenn, I found out this is a more serious problem than what I thought. See, in HR, I would have males come to my office too late. I would have males coming in for conversations when they should have been having that 5 months ago. And now they need serious help. They need more than our EAP, our employee assistance program. They need a medical leave, or they might be exiting our organization altogether. And after talking about, results driven teams and how do we reduce burnout at the root with Glenn, I found out this is just the tip of the iceberg. Um, the language reframes, the conversations we're not having, the stigma around this is much larger than what I thought in my experience was a problem. It's more of an epidemic. And I want Glenn to tell a little bit about his story as well, because you can kind of see the environment we have set up for men to not talk about it, to hide it. And, this is resulting in higher increase in statistics that we don't want increasing. So, welcome, Glenn. Glenn, tell us a little bit about how you got talking about men's mental health and resiliency training. What's your background here?
Well, a lot of times your vocation finds you, and that was the case with me. I was one of those guys. I worked in the trades for over 20 years. Most of my career was spent in Alaska and with commercial heating. And so in Alaska, when you have a no heat situation, you can't just walk away. You can't just be like, oh, we'll deal with it tomorrow. You have to stay with the project. You have to get the heat back on. And because I worked with so many talented technicians and contractors and mechanical engineers, we were always able to do that. It wasn't easy though. And, I think what you are hitting on is the culture in the trades, the culture of silence. And that culture of silence is something that we are shifting. It's something that we get to shift. We're the team on the field, which means we got this. We get to be the trailblazers. We get to be the cycle breakers. And it's not going to be easy. And it's going to require us to step into our courage. And so for me, because I'm a little bit hard headed, it took a series of rock bottom events for me to really wake up to my own patterns of self abandonment, my own realization that the reason I hid behind the facade of being a provider, of manning up, of, simply ignoring my own needs, my own emotional needs, which I didn't even understand was because I had no bandwidth. I didn't have the tools to really negotiate or navigate those things. And that wake up call came when I was told by my ex that she could no longer meet any of my emotional needs. And had it been a second sooner or a moment later, we would have just been an argument. And I would have got defensive and all those kind of things. But it was a moment where I paused and I thought, I know I have emotional needs. So could I write a paragraph on it? No. Okay. What could I write a sentence about it? And the answer was still no. And that hit me like a slap in the face. I was like, how can I be over 4 decades into my life and I have no clue how to even discuss my own emotional needs? I did recognize that I had them. And that became the path where I started uncovering that because there's a study in Canada that says 90% of the people working in the construction trades or who I like to call infrastructure frontliners all came from tough childhood backgrounds, whether it's big T trauma or little T trauma. And it makes sense because as we're children, as we're growing up, we learn how to ignore things. We know how to compartmentalize things. And that makes us good for being in chaotic situations to push through and bring the project in on time, to get the heat back on, to to drop into a sewage lift station and clean it out and fix a pump and get the system going again. Yeah, the problem comes in is we don't take time to step back, recalibrate, retool, and then re-engage. And that's where I started really digging in for myself because it became simply life threatening. And like I said, it was a series of rock bottom events. So the other one was I showed up at the doctor's office for a nasal infection, and she told me that I wasn't walking out of there until the pharmacist showed up with three separate medications to bring my blood pressure into check. I was over 80 pounds heavier than I am now. I quit looking at the scale when it hit 300. I was just too embarrassed, too ashamed of myself to even look at it. And it was catching up with me. And she was afraid that I would have a stroke or a heart attack behind the wheel of my truck. I
Wow.
was just like, man. So that was the beginning for me, is starting to really look at what I needed to change. And I knew that if I leaned on the medication, I would just get into a worse spot. Like, what happens then? What do I what's going to save me this next time? And so that's when I leaned into increasing my mental fitness and essentially going through the awkwardness of learning about emotional intelligence. And yes, it was awkward. And yes, it took a lot of courage. And yes, I lost some friendships over it. I quit drinking. I changed my diet. I made time to get out and walk and move my body because we can't escape our physiology. And when we're stressed, the one thing that we don't really recognize, especially as guys, I see this happen a lot in the field, is we don't make time to move our bodies. And as cortisol starts filling up our bodies, we get cortisol belly and cortisol face. And it's a signal that our body is like saying, time out. You got to do something. And where I see this show up is like, we'll have an individual who's working in the field like, oh, my Jim's doing a great job. He bid a job last week. It came in on time. We made money off of it. Let's bring him inside and have him do quotations. And almost every single time I saw those men balloon up and just start packing on the pounds. Why? They're no longer in the field moving their bodies, getting that somatic exercise and literally processing that cortisol out of their bodies. And guess what else happens when we're not processing it? That cortisol leaches out of our pores and literally infects our environment. Our stress is literally contagious. When you listen to neuroscientists like Dr. Tara Swart, she discusses how anyone who's working within about 10 feet of you is getting infected by your stress. Even though you're keeping a lid on it, it's still coming out. And so for me, that was the stepping point where I knew I got to do something. I need to do something. And I wanted to also lead by example for my own children so that they could see that shift in me, that I was a cycle breaker. I was stepping outside of my comfort zone, stepping into the awkwardness of learning emotional intelligence and learning how to show up for myself in a way that mattered.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say the like you're oozing stress because have you ever heard the saying like problems are following me or problems are surrounding me? Yeah, because you're putting that energy out there. It's coming back right to you and it creates your own chaos. And it's interesting your story because in manufacturing we reward firefighting, don't we? The people that are on point, they're in the middle of the night and they're more than willing to do it, we give them bonuses and praise and it's great that they want to step in, but at what level does it become toxic that you're actually rewarding the wrong behaviors that are causing their own stress? And you had ever hit rock bottom, but let's step back for a moment and talk about the symptoms that people might have been seeing in your situation or what you're seeing with clients, because being in a male dominant field, it's common for males not to talk about their feelings, unfortunately. It's common for males to have the bellies you're talking about, or especially manufacturing or the trades, not not the greatest diets, right? Vending machine diets, I think you call them like car calories. Uh, it's common to being that, and because everyone around you is doing it, you do it too. So, really, what are some distinguishing symptoms that we can start to look out for one another to open the conversation before it gets to a point where someone won't let you out of a doctor office?
Oh, that's a great question. And that's my advice to the guys that I work with is don't ignore the signs. We recognize them and we ignore them because we don't have the bandwidth to address them. We don't have the tools or the skills to address them. So why open a can of worms that you can't get back in the can? So the subtle signs that start showing up is resentment. That's a big one. Where you start feeling cynical, where you start just having this negative attitude toward things, where you start realizing that you have to escape from your life. You have to numb out. You have to turn to food. You have to turn to, for me, it was food, drinking, um, getting out and partying and just spending time, which I thought was relaxing when I only ended up using my PTO to just recover or I'd get sick. That's another sign your body's like, all right, we're having a timeout, whether you want to or not. And for me, chronic stress showed up as back problems, sciatica. The weight gain didn't help that out either. And so then my body would just shut down. I couldn't get out of bed. I was self-medicating with over-the-counter painkillers just to get in my truck sometimes. Those are the signs. Those are the signs of pushing through to the point where, I was just having dangerous habits, that were putting my own life at risk. So to show up for ourselves is to pause, to do the thing that is most humbling, to say, I need support. I don't know how to get out of this pattern. And to open up to around the guys that are around you to be like, thought I had this dad thing figured out, but man, things are just going sideways at home and I don't really know what to do. And you never know where that conversation is going to go. And I call that leading with bold vulnerability. And when I started doing that, started hearing guys say, what we ended up doing is we started family counseling. And I learned that I just needed to listen and I needed to practice listening. And that's all my kids needed was just me to listen. I didn't need to fix anything. And I was pressuring myself to fix it and to do something about it and relieving myself of that and learning how to listen. Man, our relationships are way better. Oh, it was a breath of fresh air to know I wasn't the only one, to know that I wasn't the only one struggling and leading with bold vulnerability. Yes, it takes courage. And yes, some guys are going to be like, whatever, they're going to blow you off. Most of them are not going to. Most of them also need that conversation. So the other subtle signs are going to be besides resentment, besides your diet, besides the weight gain, are you're only taking PTO to recover. Your
Mm.
weekends aren't spent doing the things that recharge you. What are the things that drain you in your life? Have you defined them? Do you even know what they are? What are the things that recharge you, that give you more energy than they take? I had a buddy I was talking to, for him, blacksmithing. He got into a blacksmithing co-op where everybody shares tools and shares the cost of doing something like that. And he's making all kinds of cool things. I have another guy who got into glass blowing and I had no clue about this. He's like, yeah, I love it. It just fills me with so much. You should see the cool things I made. Again, if you're working with your physiology, we have a system in our brain called the reticulating activating system. And once you give it a definition, it starts seeing those things in your life. I had no definition around the things that recharged me. And it's something we need to take time to do for ourselves to, again, to end those patterns of self-abandonment where we get praised by showing up and pushing through and manning up, to say, you know what, I'm going to man up by showing up and doing something, going out and hanging out with my buddies and just being in nature, spending time with my dogs, whatever it is that recharges you, you owe it to yourself and to those you love and to those you lead to do those kind of things.
Yeah, and I love that you're talking about the recharge. And interestingly enough, I don't know if you caught this, Glenn, but those were all hands-on hobbies, which makes sense for tradespeople, hands-on, hardworking people, right? They like working with their hands and creating something from that. But what's interesting from having these discussions with people who are in burnout or lost, they keep doing the same things. And you're talking about getting energized. And I'm finding that as adults, we think energizing means like what we did 10 years ago, right? But we are not the same as 10 years ago. And frankly, there's things that we've done on this path that have gotten us here that maybe we shouldn't be doing. And I found that, for example, you talked about going out to bars. I have a bar crowd and they were energizing. We could stay up all night. This is pre-kids, but all night long. And I would feel like crap the next day. And I thought that's how you have fun. That because that's the only thing I knew. And then I hit my rock bottom as well and had to start exploring what does energy look like when you're not doing some of those toxic habits that aren't leading me to a great path. And I found out certain people, certain environments, certain things I do with my hands, like you described, are even more energizing because you don't feel like crap the next day. You feel energized. So, as a male who would be exploring what does this look like, I've identified some habits and hobbies and people that probably aren't good for me right now, or I need to explore something else. How would you go about doing that? Because that's a hard habit to break. I mean, you described what you did, food, right? Your diet, your lifestyle, just pausing, processing emotions. Don't underestimate the struggle in that, right? Finally processing your emotions when they come in, those bold discussions. I mean, you're talking about rerouting so much of your lifestyle. If you would look back and talk to Glenn right before his crash, what would be kind of the toughest life lesson that you would tell him to say, start here? This is
Oh,
a pivotal moment for you.
yeah, that's such a great question. And that's what we all want, right? Those are those moments we all want, those reckonings where I would have known, I wish I would have. And I did a lot of that to myself after I had my rock bottom. And so what I would say is, our society doesn't provide these moments where we have an opportunity to step back and pause and look at, like you said, what meant something to me in my 20s isn't the same thing that meant to me when I started a family. It's not the same thing that meant to me after my kids were grown and gone. It's not the same thing that happiness and fulfillment means to me in my 40s. And taking time to pause, to step back, to journal, just get the stuff out of your head. It gives you a means to purge. And one of the tools that I teach in my trainings is emotional drainage systems. If it's not coming out of us, it's infecting us. It's becoming
Hmm.
toxic. It's like having an upset stomach and it wants to vomit, but you're holding it in. And eventually that toxicity is gonna kill you. And that part's not a joke. You cannot escape your physiology. I keep coming back to that. And so
The
for
body
me,
always remembers.
it does. It does. And those are the signs that as men, we've really learned and been praised to ignore, to push through, to show up, to keep going. That's great. And that has its place. Where we're missing it is to pause and be like, okay, I need time to recharge. I need to step back and get my head together and purge. And a lot of times those purges, like if I'm resetting from a tough job site visit where everything's going sideways, where there's a design issue, whatever, I literally leave there, get next to my truck. I don't just make sure no one's looking, and I just jump up and down and just shake it out and wiggle it out, and it's like, ah, ooh, okay. And we see that happen in nature when a gazelle is getting chased down by a pack of lions and escapes. Right afterwards, that animal does exactly that same thing to get back to its nervous system, to regulate its nervous system, to shake that energy off. And for me, I would look back and say, take time to pause, to excavate, to purge what's going on, to let it out, to have a space to let it out, whether that's a men's group, journaling, therapy. It's important. It's not just going to go away. It's not going to just resolve itself by ignoring it. It's just going to collectively get worse. And like you said, it's going to become that boulder that's on your chest instead of getting that pebble in the face or the rock in the chest. And then it becomes something that you have no choice. And all of a sudden, your health is at risk. All of a sudden, you're having a health crisis. fortunate. I am no longer on any medications whatsoever. By changing my diet, by changing my habits, by changing how I lived my life, I was able to phase off all of them, and it feels fantastic. I'm so proud of myself for making that shift. Yes, it was awkward. And so the other thing I would say is taking on the mindset of a learner, the growth mindset. I think a lot of times as we age, it's hard for us to get back into those awkward times where we're fumbling around, where we feel like we're back in first grade and we judge ourselves and judge ourselves and judge ourselves. And we're so hard on ourselves that it's just easier to not do it. And so when we take that growth mindset, when we're like, I'm just learning again, this is going to feel awkward. I'm probably going to stumble. I'm probably going to fall. It's like being on a job site for the first time and using a framing hammer and just slamming your thumb, just being like, "Ugh," to going to that point where you're just like slamming in nails left and right. You're not even thinking about it. You just have practiced it so much. Just remembering you're going to get there. And I can't emphasize the importance of creating community. And a lot of time when I stepped away from the partying, when I stepped away from that lifestyle, I lost some friends and it hurt. It was that part was real. And I did make time to go through the grief, to go through that feeling of hurt, of loss, of feeling how crappy it was. And then through bold vulnerability, through having those conversations, I rebuilt my friendships around things that mattered, around things that where we can have deep conversations about what's going on in our lives, where we can spill our guts and be like, yeah, I totally blew it yesterday. I totally lost my cool. And instead of beating up on myself and shooting all over myself, I'm able to share where I'm at and get encouragement. And that's what we're looking for from ourselves is how can we be that encouraging voice in here? But I call this our 6 inch problem because the average distance between our ears is about 6 inches. And that's a lot of where our suffering comes from is because we're so damn hard on ourselves. And it's literally holding us back from a life that we don't have to escape from a life that we get to wake up to. I started using my PTO to live my dreams, to go see Iron Maiden. It was a band I'd been looking forward to seeing. I booked my flight, I got my tickets, I showed up, and they played for over 2 hours and rocked out. Instead of having to use my PTO to recover, to be laid up in my bed because my back was acting up so bad I couldn't even move.
Yeah, and I think what you're describing is it's life. Because it's hard to describe until you've been there, but you can wake up and not feel like crap. You can have a gathering of people and feel so good for days, like on this high, and it had nothing to do with alcohol or talking drama and gossip. And you're on a whole other level of energy. And that's kind of what Glenn is talking about and channeling. And I love the conversations, the bold courage that you're talking about, because someone has been through this before. Stress is not new. It has been here. It will always be. So opening these conversations, you might be missing the mentor that's sitting right next to you, right? In the trades, we call it apprentices, right? And mentors. That's skills. That's trade skills. But what about the people who have been through it? What about the people that they had the bad job site, the bad customer? What do you do in your truck? And passing on the stuff that actually helps you release the stress instead of, you know, shove it down. And yours, it's interesting. Your stress ended up in your back and aches, and mine ended up in my gut. And my digestive system
Mhm.
was the first thing to go. So when I say the body remembers, it will remember until you release it. And the further you go, the worse that this gets. And it's interesting because I'm also almost 40, and I think I feel better than I did 10 years ago. And that's what Glenn is talking about, this lighter parts of life that come back, but you have to be intentional about it. No one was taking food out of Glenn's hand. He made a decision. No one was kicking Glenn out of bars, right? If anything, they invite you and they demand that you go and you have to defend your way out. So you have to be very intentional about this. Now, let's talk about intentionality in the workplace because I would say a big culprit in men's mental health and why we can't talk about certain things, why we haven't seen this change is the environment around it. And as much as in HR, I want to be involved in men's mental health, the biggest part I can be involved is the work culture around it. So, how can we go about, or what do you work with your clients on to shift the conversation of men's mental health from being this taboo conversation to this is a problem, this is an epidemic that we need to address, and here's how we can reframe it. This is how we can get comfortable with this conversation and get people comfortable because until this societal norms around this change, I feel like it's going to be continued conversation and increasing statistics.
Yeah, I would have to completely agree. And you bring up a really important point there is that how can we make this shift? And that comes in two ways. First, what's our why? Why do we want to shift this? Well, one of those reasons is in the next 3 to 5 years, a humongous portion of the construction industry, those infrastructure frontliners, are going to be retiring. And backfilling them, it's just not happening like it used to happen. How can we shift that culture so it appeals to people to want to be in there, to want to be working? There is so much satisfaction to look at a building and say, we built that. To look back at a building that had no heat and no hot water, to have everybody coming back in and feeling the relief of it and like, we did that, we fixed that, and to have that camaraderie, oh, it is the best. And to shift that culture, we also get to realize that because we're the team on the field, we do get to be the trailblazers. We get to be the ones who are the cycle breakers who dismantle this stigma. And where does it start? It starts in modeling. And so that's why I like to work from the top down. That's why I create retreats for leaders to come back, step away from the noise, to recalibrate, retool, and then re-engage. And I like to break it into those segments because we do need to recalibrate. Just like we have tools on the field, you don't just continually use it. You make sure that your combustion analyzer is properly calibrated. So why? So it's giving you proper feedback. If I'm not recalibrating myself as I move through life, all of a sudden my resentment, it's starting to paint everything I look at. Suddenly it's coming out and everything. Oh, of course it broke down. Of course this happened. All of a sudden,
Catastrophizing.
yeah. And these are self-fulfilling prophecies, right? Then again, my reticulating activating system is doing what? It's looking for how things are going to go wrong. By recalibrating, I'm just like, how are things going right? How can I say, Jim, you did a great job. I know it was a catastrophe, but thank you so much for showing up and doing what you did. Can you talk to the apprentices and kind of walk them through what you did and how you did that? Now I'm exemplifying what he did. Now I'm acknowledging him. Now I'm boosting him up, and also we're back feeding that information and to the apprentices so that they get to learn and so that they see what's modeled and they get to exemplify that and they can't wait to be like him and to show up like he did. And so as we're working from the top down, the leadership gets an opportunity to kind of express things that they don't and shouldn't be processing in front of their teams. They get to be real. They get to unload and share with other leaders and kind of dump and commiserate together. And then as they start modeling it, when somebody comes to them, they're like, you know what? I talked to Jeff yesterday, and guess what he didn't do? He didn't freak out. He didn't blow up. He didn't start yelling at me like something's up with it. Something's going on. And then when we recalibrate, where else do we get? Especially when we get more in tune with our bodies, we get to lead from intuition. And if you listen to other leaders like Jeff Bezos, he said every single one of the best decisions I ever made in business and in life came from heart, came from gut, came from intuition.
Hmm.
And we cannot have access to our intuition until we have access to our bodies. It's not going to ever come from analysis. It's not going to come from data. It's going to come from here. And you see that over and over again with all great leaders. And that requires us to really learn how to get back into our bodies. And that's a bulk of my work. That's the first 7 weeks of my 12-week program is just that part of it.
Right.
And
Because then,
so,
well, and you're driven by, like you said, it's an instinctual. It's a gut feel. It's what you know has to be done versus acting on fear. And if you're
Oh,
not
yeah.
releasing that stress, you're acting on fear because it's similar to your gazelle story. If a gazelle is being chased by a lion, they're acting out of fear, which you're going to make mistakes. Very short term decisions are being made, and you're missing opportunity when you're acting on fear. So I love that. I sorry to interrupt, Glenn, but
Oh,
I was
no,
like, when
absolutely.
you see 7 weeks, when someone outside who hasn't done this type of process before. When you see 7 weeks, you're like, why are we spending 7 weeks on this? It's the core of everything going forward, right? If you aren't aligned in your own energy, external and internally aligned, this is where you're skipping the best part, the foundational parts that drive.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And, I did get into mindfulness, but I also recognize that I couldn't like interrupt a meeting and say, you know what, can we just stop here and can I go to my truck and do a 15, 20-minute meditation to pull myself together and then re-engage? And so the way there was a lot of factor analysis and a lot of studies done, like what is the benefit of meditation? And really what they found is that it's being able to get back into your body, slow things down. You're literally, again, working with your physiology, you're disengaging, being stuck in your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn brain, and you're re-engaging your prefrontal cortex. You literally get to think again. And that's why when you've had a tough meeting and you're 15 minutes away and you're driving in your truck, you're like, oh my gosh, that's what I should have said. It's because you're giving yourself that time. You're getting some somatic relief. You're slowing down, or you're able to like, oh, I'm not freaking out. I'm not panicking. You're all of a sudden your prefrontal cortex comes back online, and it's all of a sudden when you have those ideas. That's why we spend so much time there, because if you're a technician and you're dealing with heating equipment that is literally hazard, or an ammonia system that could suddenly explode or leak out and you're endangering other people, you need to have full access to your prefrontal cortex, not
Hmm.
20 minutes from now, in the moment. So as soon as you can slow down, get into your body, allow that shift to happen, all of a sudden you're like, you know what? Did somebody remember to open up the king valve? Did somebody check and make sure we close the test port on the gas valve so we're not leaking gas into the combustion chamber? All of those little subtle things, because the number one safety attribute, the number one safety thing that we can do for ourselves is having a clear mind.
Hmm.
Having a clouded mind, thinking about like, oh man, is my girlfriend going to leave me? So I can't meet her emotional needs because I can't show up for myself because I can't listen. And my wife going to leave me because I can't show up for the kids because I don't know how to listen to my own self. Guess what you're not thinking about? Did I make sure that I buttoned everything up before I left? Did I make sure that I took the jumper out of the limit string? Went to a job one time where the boiler was spiraling out of control. It had gotten so hot that there were burn marks on the outside panels of the paint. The relief valve was blowing off, and it was all because the technician had jumpered out the limit string and forgot and left. So when the boiler kicked on, didn't know that it had met temperature, and it just kept on firing and kept on firing, and basically turned all the water inside of it to complete steam, which is a very dangerous situation.
Yeah. Well, and
So
I want to jump on that because I think wellness and mental health doesn't get as much front time as it should in workplaces, but safety does, right? You hear it all over safety first, right? We fix these problems. I think that is extremely heightened. Uh, let's get into that for just a moment because when people are not thinking clearly or when they have all this on their back, all this in their body not processed, you start to make clouded decisions. You start to be forgetful. You start to do shortcuts because you're stressed or pissed off in the moment. Um, how could we start shifting the mindset from a portion of wellness should go to men's mental health to this is a safety initiative? Because just in this conversation that we had here, it sounds like it's a safety risk to not be having these conversations or resources available to teams.
Yeah, you are 100% right. And the first thing you can do is just look at the data. There are so many studies out there from various safety organizations that address that your mental well being, that your ability to be present and focused is by far the most important thing that you're doing on any job site, whether it doesn't matter how technical it is, your ability to be present and be in the moment is bar nothing the most important thing you can do. And again, if you're stuck in that part of your brain, that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn spot, you are literally not operating with your full capacity. And so, no intuition, none of those little nudges that your system will give you, be like, oh, you know what? I didn't think about was, did I check the ground not only at the boiler, but at the panel? To make sure that everything is properly grounded so that nobody's going to get hurt once they reach into this and start, moving things around. Those are the things that are vital, and it's not, there's so much data on it. It cannot be ignored. So first, just look at the data. It's there. There's plenty of studies that are showing that. Secondly, make it a priority. Be awkward. Be that person that has the awkward conversation, because that's what breaking trail looks like. When I grew up in Alaska, when I was a 14-year-old, I used to work for a dog musher named Susan Butcher. And some of the hardest work I did was breaking trail for her dog team. And as we were doing it, again, just to jump off where us guys learn these things, my brother and I were 15 and 14 and we're using chainsaws and stuff like that. And I had the idle set on my brother's chainsaw a little bit because it kept sputtering out. So the chain was always going. And as we were arguing, bickering, he turned and the chainsaw just caught the top of his knee. And that fast, his knee was opened up. You know what we did? We got in this little crappy Chevy Look that we had, drove 25 miles to town. We had a little a medic in our town of 63 people. He stitched my brother up. We drove right back out to the trail, started up chainsaws, and just kept on going. And this is what we're doing here is we're still breaking trail. It's going to be hard. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be uncomfortable. Just accept that fact and be the person who has the courage and the leadership to step out in front and make that awkwardness normal, and to get rid of the stigma, get rid of those anxious feelings, and open up those conversations so men can emotionally purge, utilize that emotional drainage system, and then recognizing that we need, just like an athlete, recovery routine. There is not a single high performing athlete on the court that doesn't have a recovery routine after they get off the court, and they follow it implicitly. What's your recovery routine after a stressful day, after freaking, everything going sideways on a job site and pulling it together? And you're just like, oh man, for me, it was a beer. It was a double patty Big Mac that I was just crunching in and just like looking for some sort of relief. And yeah, it does provide a bit of relief, but at what cost? Those calories, they were not only clouding up my physical system, the alcohol was giving me anxiety the next morning. The calories were clouding and draining my system, and giving me this sluggish mind and things like that. Like that's not a recovery routine you'll see any high performing athlete do, right? They're going
Hmm.
to eat right. They have their creatine, they have their hydration, they have their cold plunges. All of those things cycle into how they perform at their best. How can we employ those same tactics in our day-to-day living to have a life that we love waking up to have a job site that we know is safe? And to take a word from the military, you want to know that the guy that's coming behind you has your six, right? That means I want to know that he's fully present in a way that allows me to be fully focused forward where I'm going. To know that as he's following up my work, that everything's going to be buttoned up, that everything's going to be dialed in and left in a safe manner, so that when we leave this job site, I'm not second guessing things. I'm not worrying. I'm not literally driving back there just checking it myself because I don't trust the guy following behind.
Hmm. And
Does that
I
make
love that.
sense?
Yeah. And I love that you said the recovery routine because I think that's individual and also team. So individually, I think everyone should be accountable for something like that and support one another. But then as a team, just from manufacturing, we would have large events happen. We would even have a big safety event happen on the plant floor, and we have to go into a meeting still. And do you think anyone is present in that meeting? No, we're all thinking about what just happened, the cleanup of that, the the poor operators that have to go on working the rest of the ship. We don't give ourselves that grace and space. So not only does productivity go down, but we don't even give a moment of space to process, to talk about it. We just keep doing things. And that's the buildup that I saw is it's not Tuesday when that safety incident, it's Friday when that person snaps because it built up since Tuesday. And so creating that culture where recovery is the normal. We just had a situation, we're not having this meeting right now. And being comfortable making that call, I think also is modeling a behavior of mental health because why do we keep acting like things didn't just happen? Or say we had an incident on the floor and someone had to exit for medical or like there was a fight or a customer situation, what have you, and we just keep working. And again, this is a stressful situation. You're putting yourself a little bit more in survivorship mode. Like, I don't really trust what's going on, my environment, the people I'm around right now. And if you just give, like Glenn said, 15 minutes, hey, everyone take 15, go to your offices, no screens, no phones, don't talk to each other. Let's just do your thing for 15 minutes, go for a walk. It goes such a long way. Versus we keep pushing through, acting like things haven't happened today. And I've just seen so many incidences in manufacturing where we push on. And when I think about like my burnout collapse, uh, it was the buildup of all those things and having to just have to go into a meeting or an interview right after that, or having a situation on the floor and having, a smiley conversation right after. That's toxic, right? It's like cognitive whiplash, emotional whiplash that
Well stated.
and I knew you would get that because you're in front of customers, right? So regardless of what happened, right? You smile in front of the customers, you do your performance, but also what's happening with your work, what's happening on the safety side of that. How is that compounding day after day after day? So you talked a little bit about how you work with clients on these retreats and the setup and the foundation of that recalibrating. What other services can you provide clients to kind of reduce the stigma around men's mental health, but also how do we move forward?
Oh, that's great. I do a few things, I still advocate for suicide prevention. I do a workshop with a buddy of mine, Bernie, where we go into not just suicide prevention, just discussing the situation, the data, the statistics, but we also give men the tools. What should you say? Also, what shouldn't you say? How do you support someone who's in that situation? Because a lot of times we're like, oh man, I know Doug is really struggling, but I don't know what to say. I don't know how to unpack this can of worms for myself. Like if I say something and he starts like falling apart, I'm not going to know what to do. And so we work with teams to provide those tools and give them a sense of confidence. It's the same thing that you do with CPR. You don't just learn about it. What do? You learn to do the compressions. You actually do it. So we do that. I also do lunch and learns and workshops where we discuss what does a recovery routine look like? How do you employ your emotional drainage system? So, because you're right, we all need to be responsible for our own emotional charges and to discharge it, to recharge, to show up fully, to be fully present. And the more often we do that, that creates a very well oiled machine. Now we're not just living in reaction mode. Now we get to act from a place of aligned action. And that's where we all want to be. So, not only through that, then I also do the 12-week program, which is, basically my reignite program where you get to recalibrate, retool, and then re-engage. And at the end of that, what's really important is we spend time defining what does a fulfilling life look like to you?
Mm.
What does living your dreams look like to you? Because we're not here just to get better at dealing with more stress. We're already good at that part. We're here to get to a point where we're living a life that we don't have to escape from, where we're welcoming in happiness or welcoming in joy and pride and a sense of self-worth and confidence so that we're operating from a place of wholeness and not survival mode. And also, I do, I come in and not only do workshops, but I also do one-on-one coaching with guys who are just like, hey, I need to do this part alone, and I'm not comfortably being in a group setting, so I also provide that as well. Um, and also, I'm always open for a call. If you just need to disengage and vent and let some stuff out, I'm available. And
Yeah.
I think that's something we can do a lot more for one another is just give ourselves permission to just vent. I don't need you to fix anything, but I call it soul vomit. I just need to let some stuff out. And again, it just brings clarity, and we don't give ourselves that opportunity or that space to do that or permission to do that.
Yeah, and that kind of goes all the way back to what you said in the beginning, like I had to learn to listen, right? And the power in that. And what I love about Glenn is he's practical. So we've had in my HR world, we've had doctors come in and talk about mental health, and they did it from a doctor side. And maybe I had the wrong trainers come in, but it wasn't super relatable. It wasn't super relatable to tell someone on a 12-hour shift to eat an apple and a salad. It's not practical, it's not sustainable, it's not integrated in their environment. Glenn brings such a practical approach because he's been there and he knows the hurdles and challenges of what you're going to run into. He knows the societal pressures against you on this journey. So go check out Glenn's information and resources down in the episode notes. And Glenn, thank you so much for not only this interview but just the work that you're doing. I know that it's not trendy, it's not something that is easy to talk about coming from a burnout survivor. It ain't fun talking about your trauma out on stages and with other people. But I hope you know that the ripple effect of what you do is endless. I can't imagine the people that you have already met and how you have changed their life, which therefore changes everyone else's life around them. Like you said, the energy that you put out there. So I appreciate you and the work that you do and the courage of being bold and having these conversations.